welcome to this week's episode of Heroes of Han. With me today, as usual, is my co-host Sean. Say hello, Sean.
Hello, Sean.
And joining us today in Alex's absence is our good friend Michael. Say hello, Michael.
Heyo.
So today, Michael is our special guest, hopefully filling in the role, the void left in our hearts by Alex's absence. And I think we have a couple of special topics to talk about today. Sean, do you want to start us out?
Oh, I am very interested by the implications of Maelstrom. It's a feature that we've known about for a while from CIG in regards to, what their end goal plans are for, really how in-depth the impact of what you do in starcitizen is, that being with the environment destruction aspect. So I've always found environmental destruction to be a really cool aspect of games. It's something that I've seen a lot in Battlefield games. It was actually something that I wasn't expecting to see, but was pleasantly surprised to see in Cyberpunk as well. Not nearly as much, but there is a little bit of environmental destruction in that game. But it's a pretty cool concept. I think, and Michael, you and I have a special connection on this. One of my favorite games of all time is Just Cause 3. As just a purely fun game that really hammers down on destruction and what you can actually do with that sort of flexibility. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. It was that is a very fun game, I guess, from my childhood. I would say though that Just Cause, well, I guess it's similar in that it's not like terrain-based destruction. It sounds like we're talking. It's more like object and asset destruction with predefined, I guess, stages of destruction.
I doubt that CIG would do anything other than maybe a crater for a bomb or something, but I doubt that they would have terrain deformation to the extent of No Man's Sky, for example.
Could we get the terrain deformation like in War Thunder with the, what do you call it, the plows?
Maybe, I don't know. I think at least vehicle tracks would be pretty cool. To have them persistently stay there would be, well, I mean, apart from if they get blown away in the wind or whatever, but that depends more on the soil though. However, the specific aspects about Maelstrom that I kind of wanted to touch on, apart from just the coolness around it, is the how in depth they apparently are going. So I had to kind of examine this a little bit closely because I was looking at a couple other videos from other people in addition to some of the information released by CIG, and apparently in these calculation or in the calculations for how ships, for example, take damage, there are going to be actual factors that are taken into consideration, material, material type, the associated material, tensile strength, beams and columns like cantilever beams, anything that basically supports weight. Every aircraft, regardless of whether it be aerospace or kind of a smaller domestic airplane, they all have frames. So to the notion that they apparently plan on accounting for all of these loads and what potential damage could do to said structures is really odd to me. It's interesting, and I'm really curious to see what they do with it. But it also almost seems over the top. I don't know. That's my initial reaction to it because for me there's a very distinctive line between what makes a video game a game and what how far do you push that before it's kind of it kind of feels like maybe you're overdoing it a little bit, but at the same time, it is interesting because I wonder if they're actually going to be able to implement all those calculations in a way that isn't horribly inefficient and doesn't lag the game like crazy.
Are
Especially
you talking about, sorry to cut you off. I'm
no, go.
just, when you talk about considering the material that makes up the ships, are we talking to the level of, I guess, I don't know if you've played IL-2 Great Battle series. They have
No, I have not. I
it's
think I've
even
heard
to
of
the
it, but
point
I've
where
not
like
played
the
it.
wings, yeah, yeah. Well, like in that it's pretty, they have a very very good, it's probably the best damage model I've ever seen. But like you can have wings that will actually physically bend, and you can have basically damage that was done earlier in so it's a World War II combat flight simulator if people didn't know.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
yeah, so like if you take damage on like if you get hurt, destroy, if you take damage to like a part of a wing and you pull really hard, you'll find that part of the wing be liable to snapping off and stuff like that. But mainly it's like the bending mechanics and all that. It's very well done. I wonder if you were thinking more like that, or is it more kind of the health bar of the structural component of the ship is a function of as a modifier that's a function of the material component.
From my understanding, from what I've read, I think it's somewhere in between those two.
Yeah,
So
that's what
I
I was gonna
think,
say.
yeah, I think you have, like as you said, modifiers from again from based off of what I'm reading. But then there's also in it, like, it's basically like they take those properties and use them as modifiers to determine what happens to the part. So one of the examples that was used in one of the descriptions that I read was if you're using a ship with a ballistic cannon and you shoot like a gladius in the wing, where you shoot them on the wing is apparently going to determine what happens. Like, does it just punch a hole straight through the wing? Maybe it hits like control surfaces or something, and then it makes atmospheric flight like super hard. If that Gladius was to go and then fly down into atmosphere, maybe they would have lost control of their left wing or something. And apparently, this also is. It's also possible that if you hit the wing just right, you might just shear part of the wing completely off. Like, I don't know if it would be one shot, but presumably, like based on, like I said, based on the wording of what I read, that's what it sounded like. That it would, if especially if the round of the weapon that was fired at it was large enough, it does seem plausible that there may be scenarios in which part of that wing might just completely just get blown off.
In some ways, is this kind of calculation stuff easier in the long term than having to rely on manual sort of structural breaking setup and animations?
See, that's what I don't know because in the models that they showed for how Maelstrom is going to, like, if they say if a part of a wing breaks, Maelstrom has like a predetermined set of little pieces that the ship can break into. And we've already seen that with the salvage gameplay where when you pop the ship open and it just kind of combusts into multiple little pieces, and
Yeah.
you can see the pieces that it breaks apart into. But apparently, that's only the first step of like a two-step process where that's the pieces that are there now. But apparently, there are going to be even more as far as the damage model goes, and you know I just would, and maybe this is just me not being a software developer and lacking an understanding about how you could possibly make such calculations efficient enough to be, utilized in a live game environment instead of a render. But you know, I have a hard time believing that they are truly going through and doing all of the beam deflection calculations on, a wing that has been damaged. Kind of like the example that you gave, Michael. I don't remember what that name of
Yeah,
that simulator was. You said
it's the IL-2 Great Battle series.
IL-2 Great Battles,
I mean,
but
they could offset some of that with just simulating it instead. And that's what a lot of good flight simulators do when they don't have the data for the historical aircraft. Like, for instance, the A6M50. There's like a sequel to that series that was recently announced by like some of the developers broke off from the original team, and they had really touted that their experience from the industry, they're going to be using a lot of CFD simulations in order to make up for the loss in historical data and
Right.
still working equipment. So you could probably do something similar, especially in this environment where we're not really simulating historical ships. It's just it's up for interpretation. So I feel like that could
Right.
really help.
I mean, I think they could feasibly do some calculations on certain ships, like the Gladius, for example, because it has a known, like a known and quantifiable, like dimensional wing area that they could, in theory, extrapolate and do all sorts of analysis on. But again, considering how much, in my personal opinion, CIG has gotten wrong from a technical perspective and like an engineering perspective, not in everything, but in a lot of things, they've gotten, for touting realism, in my opinion, they've gotten a lot of stuff wrong. But, taking that into consideration, I kind of doubt that they would go to that extent to ensure, a realistic response in terms of damage to a wing, because they have hundreds of ships, and I doubt that they would go out of their way to do wind tunnel equivalent testing and all that on every ship that has what would you call them, aerial surfaces. I'm blanking on the term right now.
Airfoils.
Yeah, airfoils or wings or anything like that.
And what I'm worried about is with things being so difficult to, I guess the desync issues and the lag that we experience graphically, is introducing something like this just going to, make that even worse than it is now?
Yeah, because I mean, you think about what happens when a ship full of 2,000 SCU boxes explodes. The server just shits the bed. You know.
Yeah, I feel like there are definitely a lot more pressing issues than simulation that to consider. But I mean, it really depends on like the amount of people they have and how diverse how many different offshoot tasks they can handle at the same time. Is for whether or not this is like a priority. But
Well,
I mean, it's cool features.
I think it makes sense to introduce this kind of now as opposed to previously, since I guess
Right.
the saying that I always go with is, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. So even though a lot of work has already been done and this is going to upend some of it and things like that, I think it makes sense to introduce this idea and start working on the mechanics of it as soon as they can, so that in the future it makes it a lot easier to compensate for these things and to calculate these things. And I feel like taking it down to like a material level makes sense for what they're trying to accomplish, so that it can be easier to simulate. I feel like it would be, if we have these known knowns, which are whatever these materials are that we use between ships and where the placement of those things are, then we can use that to kind of help build those simulations independent of whatever ship it is.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, I think even if they do have some realistic simulation going on, I'm also firmly in the belief that it's gonna be merged with some kind of modifier system that says, hey, if this much or this amount of damage is done to this part, that means it's just gonna fail the next time you do anything to it.
Yeah, I think that is another aspect of it that this kind of leads into, is the gameplay mechanic of repair, because that's something that we don't do very often because it's a lot easier to just kind of land and do an automatic repair. But in a world where you're kind of more self-sufficient and you're repairing things, it would be really interesting to take into account prior damage and how repairs affect that area.
In actually another thing, like, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but it does occur to me that if the loads on individual materials matter, like, and I'm aware this is a huge tangent, but let's say hypothetically, right, that your Cutlass Black has a maximum load that the floor can support, right, and airplanes, as our closest analogy, well, one of our closest analogies, have an even stricter takeoff weight. So that does cause me to wonder if ships might end up having a maximum takeoff weight. That like I don't know if that would ever happen though, but it. And I know this is super speculative. I'm just running around in circles in my head at this point, trying to figure out if they would do something like that, because we already have severe changes in ship handling currently in the live game based on how much cargo you're hauling and roughly some influence based on where it is physically inside your cargo hold. But if they're planning to make that even more influential in how your ship reacts, it may be possible that you might not be able to take off if you're overfull or if you've overfilled the ship, or at the very least, depending on how you've oriented the cargo, it might cause your ship to behave super erratically if you've precariously stacked a bunch of boxes and then suddenly they fall over while you're flying close to the water, and then oops, all of a sudden your nose dips in and you're having a bad day.
Yeah. Well, the thing about that is though is this weird world of physics that we live in this game,
Oh yeah.
because essentially, if a ship is generating its own gravity, it technically wouldn't matter how you load it, since
Right.
you're your own gravitational reference frame in that. So at best, I could think maybe in atmosphere or near a gravitational body strong enough to influence your ship that having too much weight would change the flight characteristics of it. And maybe at that point, a load shift could impact it. But in space, I can't imagine it
No, I
actually
don't think
having
in
any kind of
space.
impact.
I don't think in space it would at all. The
Yeah.
conditions I'm more so referring to are like very low and close to the ground on a planet or something. But even then, the gravity generators have to be strong enough to keep you right side up, even if the ship is upside down. So,
Hmm.
I don't know how much influence that would actually have. It does make sense that if cargo is unsecured and then you suddenly stop or something, if the cargo suddenly flew towards the front of the ship and it jolted the ship forward, that would make sense. But I don't know. I don't see. It's so hard for me to say because I don't know to what extent CIG plans to follow through with this stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions around physics and things associated with physics. Like I think we were talking about one time how it's not actually realistic to be moving at speed through space and get out of your ship and have the ship leave you behind. Like you should technically stay right next to it since you have the
Right.
same inertia as the ship
Oh,
does.
that's wow. I didn't realize that was a thing in Star Citizen right now that you wouldn't follow along. But it makes sense. Now that I think about it, that's how they modeled it. But it also brings into question just how would they model, or if they would model like super heavy planets or with like a lot of mass and really high gravitational fields. Like, what would the
Crusader.
gameplay locations be
Well, yeah,
for
because
that?
if
Because
you
as far as I know, there's not any.
yeah, that's a good question because if you have a load that's appropriate for Hurston, for example, when you're flying around Crusader, it's much heavier technically relative to the planet. So how would that change those kinds of characteristics?
I mean, I know that a lot of ships feel especially sluggish in Crusader's atmosphere, and I think that's part of the reason that Now, granted, this could just be highly coincidental, but I have found that from my own personal opinions of Crusader ships that they tend to handle better in Crusader's atmosphere than other ships.
Yeah, but how? I don't know. I don't know if it's actually gravity affecting that so much as just atmosphere, because there are moons of similar size but different levels of atmosphere that behave differently when you're flying in them.
That's also true. It could just at that point, for my personal feelings, it could just be uh, being gaslit into thinking that Crusader ships are better because in many cases they are. But
It's one of your famous if-then statements. If Crusader
yeah,
ship in Crusader, then go faster.
yeah, something like that. But what were you saying before I completely went and sidetracked your entire line of questioning? Because you had said something pretty interesting earlier, and then I went off on a super big tangent.
To be honest, I don't remember. I think I was talking about like making the lag worse with all these. So what I picture with Maelstrom is when, and of course this is completely unknown since we probably haven't received this level of detail, and if we have, I probably didn't go into it because But when a ship breaks into pieces or buildings break into pieces or whatever it is, it's going to be creating new entities. Having to load and track those entities, I can see as being something the server might struggle with. That's kind of my concern is maybe medium or large size battles or locations that have multiple NPCs and other ships landed and maybe other ships in the air and something breaks apart. Is it just going to be a constant lag every time these things happen? And I don't know how they're going to address that, how that's going to work out.
Because I know they, like, in their ideal world, players would pick up this stuff and sell it so that it would keep the servers clean and tidy. But I think a more realistic thing would be after a certain entity limit, you just start culling stuff like hard. And I think another thing that they could potentially do to help not create more entities than they have to is perhaps they could. I have one of my friends keeps talking about like shaders and how you can do things with shaders to make them look like objects, but it's still just a shader. So that does beg the question: is maybe some of the debris for houses at least, instead of when they break apart, instead of making physical objects, like any of the small pebbles on the ground could just be like a shader or something, so that way it doesn't impact performance nearly as much as a full 3D like modeled entity.
I would assume that wouldn't be synced across, like in the netcode, to other clients,
Probably
though.
not. I
Right.
mean the water isn't the water physics that they added. They're all client side or client side rendered.
Yeah, but I mean, it's using, as far as I know, the same almost like the physical calculations are done, but the same inputs are given to players who are present. I mean, there might be some differences depending on like how far away you are from them, but they still have like theoretically the systems. If you like modeled the systems for each client that's observing the same phenomenon, input given the same input, it would generate the same result. In other
Right.
words, the waves would look the same to everyone else.
That's my
But
understanding as well.
I just don't know if there'd be, at least in my game, because I think I know what you're talking about with like shader based like debris, and it's kind of more like a, in my mind I'm just thinking of kind of like the like the 2D flat effects, like explosion effects, and
Oh,
that you used to see in games where you saw like these small like, I guess like pixelated debris that would clip through the environment, but it
no,
would
no,
like
no,
add a
no.
little bit more to.
I'm talking about the more modern advanced stuff
Okay.
where you like see an explosion and then debris would fly off it, but if you like actually try and go interact with that debris, you just either a phase through it, um, and it has no backface culling, so it just like disappears if you put your camera in it, um, or it's just like there and you can't do anything with it like at all.
Is it possible to have like you can give the impression of it something being 3D through 2D image? But my question
Like a 2D
is
shader? I believe so,
yeah,
yes.
is can the shader be three dimensional? Is that possible?
Yeah, from my limited knowledge in game design, the way its shaders have been explained to me, yes, I believe that is something that you can do with them. And from my understanding, it is significantly less taxing on performance than entities are.
Well, that's great from one point of view, but how does that like spread out to other players who might be in the area or players who visit after the fact? If these objects are supposed to be interactable, like in theory,
Right.
being able to salvage them and stuff, how does that play out?
That's what I don't know. Because, I'm a huge fan of the promise behind what they want to achieve. I just don't fully understand how it's going to work because unless they have like a dedicated server shard, like one entire server is just rendering like a little tiny area because of how many entities it has. I guess that's maybe one way that they could combat that is by having smaller and smaller server shards as the
Mm-hmm.
technology improves, so that you could have like a, for lack of a better example, like a 10 meter by 10 meter by 10 meter square that is all being rendered by just one server, and then the next square over is being rendered by another server. And I don't know how small they can realistically make these server shards, but that's really the only way that I could see them having a high entity count in one area without massively impacting the surrounding areas.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it should be based, like it really depends. It sounds like it's mainly limited, if not only limited, by the number of servers they have. Um,
Or the entity limit that they can, uphold.
no, I mean like as far as how small they can shrink a
Oh
shard
yeah,
down to.
that too. But
Um,
I don't know.
I don't
Mike, do
think
you have
that's too.
any?
Well, I was gonna say I don't
No.
think that's too far fetched because the tech demos they've done for the shards and the all the cross server communications and netcode and stuff like that have been like in a single room. It's like two players in an opposite sides of a room that were in different shards, and there was an object moving between them.
the thing is, there were in that demo that you're talking about, there was only 3 shards, which would imply only 3 servers. The part where I'm considering there might be a bottleneck as far as like just add more servers to solve the problem is in the rate at which multiple servers can communicate with one another. Because when one server needs to offhand information to another, then it's no longer something that's just being processed in that one server alone, and all the information is like right next to it, so it can update information at once.
Right. And they definitely have to make that handshake as efficient as possible if server meshing is even going to work correctly. So, I don't know. What were you saying, Mike, before Michael got carried away?
No, I was just saying that what we've seen has been down to a size that we are discussing, so it seems feasible that that would be eventually what could happen, is to have shards that can manage a 30 cubic meter area at a time. It's just like you guys have said, we're technology and hardware limited right now, or at least we think we are. Who knows what they have going on in the back end? But as things progress, I could see it improving. So I'm just really kind of more worried about the short term and what that looks like when, this Maelstrom comes out and we have, the destruction of large ships happening in an area and what the performance impacts will be.
Yeah. And, personally, I haven't really seen the feasibility, at least in its current state, for them to have anything less than one game world being rendered like one shard per planet or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then because I don't know how many. Well, realistically, I don't know how many servers they actually own. So, but I also kind of see it sort of as a like putting all of your eggs in one basket sort of thing, and naturally as most human beings, I'm sure, it's usually a bad idea to put all of your eggs in one basket. So if you
it's never a
dedicate
bad idea.
if you dedicate all of your servers to manage individual shards, the question, as Michael then pointed out, is how many shards can you realistically have, and then the secondary problem, which is more like the primary problem, is what is the latency between them, and then what I'm most concerned about is at what point do they, like, if there's a problem, for instance, with one shard, do the people in that shard just get kicked from the game, or are they forced onto another shard? Because if they have no shards free, presumably they would probably have like some servers on standby that can take over for a shard if another shard server goes down. But if they used up all of them and they didn't have any in reserve, I mean, I can't see why they would do it that way. But if they did, then what would happen to the players that were on the shard in question? Does it's just a weird kind of gray area that I think.
I'm pretty sure recently they've been doing testing. I could be
No,
wrong.
they
I'm not
have.
super. Yeah, like at least some of like the upcoming updates, like the whole playtesting concept was to test that as a concept. And I think they even mentioned something about you can expect less 30Ks as a result or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, they have 30K protection working now, and it works most of the time. So, like, instead of crashing outright, usually you just get server error, please wait, or whatever, and then, you know, shit happens, and you wait for
Some
like
time
5
goes
minutes,
by
and the server
and
comes back.
then eventually you come back in. Yeah.
So
Besides,
what is the?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, like as a general thing, because I'm new here. Is there a kind of a limit to like the topic of conversation, or like are we talking purely on speculative things, or is there
No,
a
you
limit?
can. No, you can do whatever you
Okay,
want. I mean,
so
unless you
I
have
wouldn't
something.
mind bringing up the like my favorite topic with Star Citizen, at least that a lot of people um, they hard disagree with me. So I really like the enjoy the concept of Star Citizen becoming as much of like a full fidelity simulator geek off. Like you have to spend a while to like learn how to fly a ship before you can fly a ship, and nobody wants that. I'm like I full understand that I'm in the niche there, and I know that me and Sean have gone back and forth at least even when I try to compare some of like the as unrealistic as it is like some of the DCS combat gameplay and how Star Citizen could benefit from that if they developed a little bit more I guess realistic standoffish um, combat gameplay between ships. I was just wondering what Mike's take was on that, or what level of realism do you want Star Citizen to get to before I guess you'd say it's too much, or if that would ever be a point for.
Are you referring to like skill development as a barrier for actions? Like I couldn't fly a ship till I actually went through not a tutorial, but like a step-by-step process to actually learn how to fly it?
So I feel like a lot of things would be in my world, like a lot of things would be the same between ships. But I guess you could say like the startup procedure for each thing would be kind of unique if you were to start from like from cold to hot, and a lot of like the skills you would learn from one vehicle would transfer quickly into other vehicles, so you wouldn't have too big of an issue between switching around. I guess is how I would hope it to be, but I would like every vehicle to be very unique in their feel because right now
Mm-hmm.
it's mostly I mean, obviously there's like a difference between the equipment you can take on and their balance in game. But shoot, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, but it's like it feels mostly like the as far as the feel of each ship is it's just that the HUD is got like a different kind of colored gooey elements and stuff for how it feels. I mean, yeah, I could be wrong. Maybe it was you went back to the whole like Crusader ships fly better type phenomenon that you experienced, Sean. Maybe uh, that's just something I haven't noticed, but
Yeah,
I think.
I'm
Oh no, go ahead, Mike.
well, I'm good with like ships having individual characteristics. I not particularly a fan of having ships be unique in their actions, like maybe startup sequences or flight sequences and things like that. I feel like that would not only be a little bit tedious, but like probably upset everyone who spent thousands of dollars building sims that have to like worry about what ship they're in every time and reconfigure their controls and stuff. I'm good with like, I would say a cinematic universe level of realism would maybe be how I put it. So like if you watch Star Wars, it's like everybody knows how to fly every ship. They just hop in, they flip a few switches, and they get moving. Like I'm kind of good with that, but I'm also like you also see that different ships have different characteristics, and some have like customizations to them that perform certain tasks. Like I want that kind of stuff, but I don't necessarily want to have to like learn how to fly a Drake ship and then learn how to fly well, actually probably even individual ships. So learn how to fly a Caterpillar and then learn how to fly a Cutter and then learn how to fly a Cutlass. Like I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, Michael, that I think the learning a ship, as you put it, would you could probably argue that it would be more along the lines of learning where the buttons are, and that's really it. Because you know, once you have a basic understanding of how to fly, the ships really shouldn't be any different other than just knowing where certain buttons are to do things. So, you know, and as far as I'm concerned, the game kind of already accomplishes this. If as long as you don't use any hotkeys, you know, you conceivably have to know where all of the buttons are. The difference being is that just now in the game's current state, you don't have to like, what's the word? Your character doesn't interact with the buttons, but I know that's a planned feature that they've talked about, where your character will actually reach out and push any button that you interact with. So that might help make it feel a little bit more sim-like to someone like you.
So they mentioned, you said specifically they're adding animations for.
Yes, they've said that before.
I don't know if
I mean, unless
like
they go back on their word.
So
The Gladius,
my thing is that I know that some button, like especially in the gunner seats, right? If you want to like turn on the gyro stabilization, you actually have to like look for the physical button and left click it. I guess I wish as far as like the fidelity of ships, I don't feel like the cockpit, because how do I put it? You put a cursor and it's pretty easily to like fumble it around the screen in order to, and it's not even going to be looking at a specific button. It's literally just labeled do startup sequence, right? And it does everything for you. I guess it would be nicer if they just separated that out into like individual things. I guess what I will say is that a lot of my fun in simulators is it's very fun to like kind of learn new stuff. Like I'm kind of the crazy guy who would, and I was actually just talking about somebody, talking with somebody in real life, because he's like a private pilot, and I have a vested interest in getting my private pilot's license as well. But I kind of I don't foresee myself as the type of person who would continue to fly after get my license. I just really have a passion for aviation, and I like to like learn about like how things are done properly, and that's I guess a key fun aspect that I kind of wish maybe was a little bit more into Star Citizen. But I get that I'm a complete niche set of the market that actually most simulator players even disagree with like my standpoint on stuff.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you to an extent. Like I think actually learning stuff is cool, but I also think that as much as people may try to deny it, I think Star Citizen, especially with the addition of the master modes stuff, is absolutely leaning into being more of an arcade space sim than an actual space sim. Because, quite frankly, and I've said this before, and I will very briefly reiterate, the master modes is not realistic at all, not in the slightest. It betrays almost every aspect of Newtonian physics that we're taught to adhere to as mechanical engineers. So it's quite frustrating to me, especially when my ship doesn't behave the way that I expect it to anymore. Such as instantaneous deceleration, case example one. and there were already little things like jumping out of your ship while it's moving, and suddenly it's
I feel
gone,
like
and
that one might get
that
fixed.
one's really strange to me. Like
Well,
not
that
Well,
and being affected
conservation
by
of
ship
momentum and inertia.
movements.
Yeah, it's strange, but I wanted to take a second to acknowledge Dave, who has
Hi
joined us.
guys. Hello.
Hey,
I don't know. Can you
Dave.
guys hear me? Is that working?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Everything's good?
we can
Cool.
hear you perfectly well, sir.
Awesome. So, real quick, I wanted to say something. Michael, you mentioned that you kind of wanted to do the whole startup process of your ship, like turning on thrusters, turning on the ACM, turning on each step of the way properly. I know that CIG has mentioned in past content that one day they want it to be that there is a ready system button. I think it's keybound to U or R, whatever it used to be on the keyboard, right? Where it just turns everything on. But a more advanced player, such as yourself, who wants to do it the other way, could learn to do it by clicking each individual part first, and it could, in theory, be faster to give you that bonus for knowing how your ship works. So I think what you're looking for is coming down the line.
I don't know if
Soon,
I'd
TM.
necessarily say faster is what, because for instance, even in flight simulators, right? Although all like specifically DCS, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you have the cold start option where you do have to go and sit around and click all the buttons. And I think even not even just DCS, like if you consider other simulators that do have like a quick start button, you have also
Mm-hmm.
the option to hot or already like where everything is already turned on, and that obviously simplifies a lot of like your startup process. So I guess I would say that I would envision the quick start key as being an option to if you're like you don't want to wait and you want to just immediately kind of get into
Yep.
it. But there is
Agreed.
a lot of times when in those games when you would want to start off cold just because it's a lot more immersive that way. Like you really feel like you are trying to pilot the ship, you are turning it on, you are, kind of it's just more immersive.
You're giving your more agency to your actions. I
Hmm.
understand.
Yeah, I think CIG hasn't quite figured out what the bonus would be for being good enough with your ship to cold start it. But I think one of the ways they mentioned is that the hot start button, the ready all systems button or flight ready button would take longer because it's the computer going through and activating each of the systems in a specific order to get the ship up and running. Whereas cold start, as you're calling it, the player could do it in whatever order they wanted and in theory could do it more effectively or skip out on certain things they don't need. I mean, I could think of, for example, right now, if I'm flying a Retaliator, I don't need to power on my weapon systems because the turrets have their own capacitors, right? So I could skip that whole step and then get out into the verse quicker.
Hmm.
Have you hung onto your Retaliator, by the way, Dave?
Oh, yes, I have.
I remember.
I got the dope ass. Or sorry, the.
Oh hell yeah.
It looks good. Looks good.
Yeah, I remember. I remember last time we spoke, you had visions of grandeur of turning your Retaliator into a cargo smuggling empire of sorts.
And that's what it is now. Look
Yeah,
at me.
you're finally getting to that
four.
point.
I know. I got 4 torpedoes on the front, and 32 SCU of cargo in the back. Good to go.
And where do you keep your subwoofer?
Right. That's exactly right. But yeah, no, I am liking it. I actually I am in an org in game, and we are I guess like we do a lot of military simming, so to speak. And so we just recently did a really cool mirror match, 2 Retaliators fully crewed with full guns, fighter escort. So I think it was like 7v7. Yeah, 1 fighter escort per, and then a fully crewed Retaliator of 6. We did that for like 2 hours the other night, just tally against tally, seeing who could pilot it better.
Sounds pretty fun.
It was.
Now, if bar anybody having any other questions, I do actually have a question for you since, Mike, if you remember, in our last, it was either our last episode or the episode before that, we were having a discussion about distortions, and I know almost nothing about them still. I still haven't looked into them at all. However, Dave, I'm
Yes.
assuming that you have more experience with the current state of distortions. Do you have any comments about how they are currently?
I wouldn't. So I'm a little behind on current state. I can talk 322. Maybe not necessarily. Or what are we on 323 now? Yeah. So I took a little bit of a hiatus recently. Just got back in. I will say that a lot of my friends who enjoy borrowing other people's cargo temporarily enjoy running partial distortions, but with the way soft deathing is working now, they're not doing it at all. It's just kill, kill, kill. But distortions are quite interesting. I actually have a story of a friend who was in a Caterpillar today. He had a full load of cargo, and he got shut down and ended up losing everything because he was in atmosphere. So I think there's pros and cons for distortions. What exactly are you curious about?
I'm more so curious about how you defend against distortion attacks. Do you have to get their shields down before distortions start to affect your ship, or is it just immediate? Because it used to be immediate. Like somebody starts lighting you up with distortions, and all of a sudden you've got malfunctions, and there's literally nothing you can do about it. So it's basically, it used to be, at least back in 322 and prior, you would, whoever shot first was pretty much guaranteed the victor, because you couldn't do anything to stop them at that point.
I think it's I think the way they've done it is they've added a component HP bar, like a back end HP bar, to each of actually all the components now have a health stat. So your shield generators each have a health stat, and the different types of shield generators have different health stats. It's for every part. And so the distortion will immediately start doing damage to the component it's affecting. So if everything's online, you're going to be doing damage to all the different components. And then as that health bar disappears, quote unquote, by being distorted, your systems will go offline. And they'll stay offline for 5 minutes. And then they can come back online. As for defending against it, fly better, skill issue.
So
you know what I'm saying?
So the shields don't do anything?
Not really, because the shield generators themselves are a component affected by distortion. So as they're absorbing, because all the shields are in theory doing is protecting your hull from hull HP, which distortions don't affect at all. I would feel like having your shields on or off makes no difference to a distortion weapon.
See, so my only nitpick with that is that there is no defense against distortion weapons at all.
Not right now, and I would say you'll never have defense against distortion weapons for single-seaters, but a multi-crew ship with an engineer could combat some of those issues.
Yeah, and I'm not expecting resistance for single-seaters. What I definitely am expecting resistance for is any multi-crew ship, no matter how small it is. I think it's incredibly, I can't really say a realism perspective, because that lens doesn't apply to distortion weapons in the slight. I find it very hard to believe that especially large ships would be even slightly tickled by distortion weapons.
Right.
For example, if you went after the Idris with, even 10 Gladius fighters with all the distortions, I have a really hard time believing that would do much of anything to an Idris.
I mean, I think if you don't have an engineer, let's just say it's, hypothetically, we're a couple years in the future, and it's Idris fully crewed with AI blades. So all the turrets are active, and you have one player piloting. Distortion may mess with him, because he's not going to be able to get out of his pilot seat, run down to whatever's malfunctioning, replace it or repair it using the multi-tool, and get back to his pilot seat. So I think it's kind of like, I agree with your statement if he has other people playing with him, which I think is the most important part about the game, is multi-crew ships need multiple people.
Right. So at least in the current model, it does phantom damage to components. I would think it would be more realistic that instead of doing damage and somebody having to repair it, it's more like it disrupts it, and maybe
Flickers
an
it?
engineer. Yeah, maybe an engineer has to discharge the excess electricity or something that's messing it up.
Sure.
Ground it maybe. I don't know. I don't really.
Yeah, using or even changing out a fuse, right? Because they have those fuses in the game now.
That's also possible.
Looking at Urkel, which our favorite website, Urkel, the FR-76, size 2 military grade A shield generator, has a distortion shutdown damage of 500,000, which means to shut down one of the 6 possible shield generators on a Retaliator or 2 on whatever other ship you're flying, you need to do 500,000 points of distortion damage to shut down that shield generator. Now, I don't know how they gamified it to make it so that, how does the game decide how much damage from your gun? So I don't know, what does an XJ2 do per shot? How much of that gets spread to each component? Is the more components on, the less damage it does, the more shots you need to do, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Spreading out the damage.
But that's why I've kind of avoided looking at distortions for so long, is because it's felt like every time they've updated them, it's just become more and more convoluted to understand how they work.
It is not fun. Alpha damage is 58, and I'm assuming that's whole damage. It doesn't really, it's hard to understand distortion right now. I just think distortion is a really cool idea. They just need to figure out what they want to do with weapons. Because right now, I mean, all we really care about is ballistic or laser, right? Those are the two things you really care about.
Yeah, I mean, those are really the only two weapon types that matter for like 90% of engagements.
I've seen a couple videos recently of people with A2s with mass drivers on them. With the big old mass drivers.
Mass drivers being kind of the new meta for weapons.
Well, being that you literally cut every single ship slower down to max, 300? Everything's slow now, so a mass driver or a scatter gun works. Because everything's close together and slow.
And you have a chance to hit it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, could you, how we used to do those Idris fights or, doing ERTs and stuff? We used to be able to just kite around the Idris. You never get touched by that railgun. Never once. So you were an idiot if you got hit by the railgun. Now, could you imagine trying to do that? Yep. Could you imagine trying to do that now with, our lower speeds? Especially in something bigger like a Retaliator or a Deemer.
Yeah, I think, Mike, that even happened to us when we did when we tried out the new Xenothreat. If you remember, I think we were in the Connie or something.
It was the Redeemer.
Oh, it was the Redeemer.
Oh, yeah.
And
the
Idris looked at us for dead on for a few seconds, and somebody, was it you, Mike, or was it Alex who said something witty about it? They're like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if the Idris shot us right now? And then we just blew up.
So I think that was Alex, because I was just surprised that we were suddenly dead, because I never would have expected the Idris to hit us.
Agreed. Yeah. I think we're very closely approaching a break point where the developers have to make a decision. I think what you guys were saying earlier about it being arcaded out a little bit more is accurate. And I think that's partially due to the fact that the player base right now that continues to play and be the most vocal are the PvPers who are looking for constant, all the time. They want the arcade game of, I die, they want Call of Duty and spaceships is kind of how I want to say it. And I'm not trying to disrespect PvPers because you guys could kick my butt all day, every day. But I think that the PvEers, I hate to use the term on a podcast, but the space bobs, the space dads like me who go mining or salvaging or just want to chill and fly a spaceship and look at the cool scenery and enjoy everything I can, we are the quiet majority of players. And because we're quiet and just deal with whatever each patch brings, it's slowly morphing into an arcade style game because the people who talk the most and the loudest on Spectrum are the loud blowhard PvPers.
Yeah, and what I would say, I enjoy the space combat, right?
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it for what it was and not what you were saying, what it's become, because I've seen a lot of people talk about master modes, and I just objectively disagree with almost every point that's been made in regard to it. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast, but I've made it well known that the way that I thought they should have fixed the speed issue is by making weapons wildly inaccurate if you were fighting above a certain speed. So if their target speed was for all ships to be going 250 meters per second, it's more of a soft cap to say hey, your weapons work perfectly fine at this speed, but the moment you go to 500 meters per second, you're not going to hit anything that's more than a kilometer
90% accuracy debuff or something.
Yeah, you're not, you could fire at something, you won't hit the side of a barn door. I thought that, in my personal opinion, that's a much better soft way to get people to slow down very intentionally. without saying, hey, now you know that ship that you bought because it was fast, it is no longer fast unless you disable your guns, shields, and flares. Great job, CIG.
I'll agree that Master Modes is a little rough. I was super excited for it because I thought, again, this is the space dad mindset, so no qualms against what you said, but I really like the idea of being in a cargo ship. It's like the Raft, for example, is one of my favorite ships in game. It's not a very good ship, but it's one of my favorites, and to be able to stay in nav mode and be able to be faster. If I get attacked, I'm still running. I'm not turning around to fight you no matter what, right? So having the flexibility to be the prey, to run away all the time unless you can catch me or catch me off guard, is nice. It's given a little bit of a different opportunity for certain types of gameplay to emerge. I don't think the way Master Modes has been implemented and what we have right now is as good as it could have been, but that was my dream. I don't necessarily enjoy it as it is right now. I don't think it's bad though. I think slowing everything down, because I fly the bigger ships, Connies and stuff like that, Herculeses. I was finding that when I was dogfighting with my org, as in we were in a group borrowing some people's cargo without permission, I in the bigger cargo ship or in a multi-crew ship would never be in the fight. I'd be chasing the fight the entire time. We call it the ball. A lot of people call it the ball, where the dogfighters are just circling each other in circles and trying to get position on each other. Well, a bigger ship can't keep up with that. They're going 600, 700 meters, whatever the speed calculation is. They're doing that speed in circles, but their circles are getting wider and wider or farther and farther away from a set point. So me and my, we'll use the Retaliator, it just can't keep up. Like, I'm just dead weight, So slowing everybody down has made the fights much more, I don't want to say dynamic, but every ship matters now. You're not outrunning things as quickly unless you're switching to.
Right.
Has there been any...
things more predictable.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to kind of bring go on a different tangent, but I'm kind of curious, has there been, because we're all talking about all these ideas that we kind of wish implemented, has there been any talk on, like, I know way back when they promised that they would add modding support to Star Citizen. Do you think that's, like, well and dead at this point, or
no,
it will become a thing, potentially?
So, I don't know if anybody else wants to comment, but what I know is that the modding tools for Squadron 42 will be supposedly, if their listings are to be believed, supposedly will be available after the launch of the single-player campaign. And from what I understand, eventually we will also have the capability to host our own Star Citizen servers, but the progress won't be the same as on the the main public servers. It's almost like and I think I used this analogy when we talked about it last time, like Fallout 76. Or, no, actually, not like Fallout 76. What's a better example? Conan Exiles?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or I was going to say WoW or even Ark would be good examples.
Yeah. Your server has that character and that progression, and then if you go to the public online servers, then that's your other character.
Yeah, well, then it would be interesting to see if maybe the modern community could create some kind of tech demo that might spur on. But I don't know. I guess at that point it might be too late. They might already be fully set in the way it has been implemented at that point, and it'll be a little bit late to try.
Along those lines.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say real quick. We've seen over the past 10 years that CIG is not afraid to drastically change something or go back on what they said they were going to do. I do not ever think that Star Citizen will be in a place where everything is cement and cannot change. I think that if a better option comes up, CIG would be willing to listen and maybe change. So I don't think we'll ever get to a point where the flight model has been this way for however long, we're not going to change it ever again. I don't think that will ever happen in this game.
So you think it'll be kind of like a live service game, first and foremost, almost?
110%. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but to answer your question more directly, Michael, I wouldn't be. I'm fairly certain that if you host your own server, like your own dedicated server for the game, they had made it clear that you can do pretty much whatever the hell you want with it.
That'd be cool.
So whether that be changing like payout modifiers for missions or whatever else you might want to change. I know that they had mentioned modding. As you said, I just don't know how much they're planning to support it for the multiplayer game. I do appreciate that they've taken dedicated servers into consideration based on the fact that, if they do adopt the live service model, eventually in the future, the actual official game servers might have an ending. Just like what happened to the Battlefield games. Like, I don't know if you guys saw, but Battlefield 4 is getting taken offline pretty soon because EA is just like, we're not going to run these servers anymore. But the difference is, Battlefield 4 doesn't have dedicated servers, so there's no way for people to host the game anymore, and it's effectively just going to disappear, the multiplayer.
Well, my hope and my fear are that we will get the ability at least to have custom paints.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a really cool multi-tool attachment to be able to spray paint something.
Let us at least, if we're not allowed to make like custom graphics, which should be very obvious why they probably wouldn't allow that, at least allow us to change like the color, like static color of like parts of the ship. Like
let us hex code our own ships.
Yeah, like all of the control surfaces orange, or something.
So when we talk about
kind of
like
what Cousin Crows is supposed to be eventually.
Yeah, there's supposed to be like a hot rod shop, like a customs, like LA Customs or Gotham Garage or something.
But when we talk about these liveries that are we talking client-side changes that like you would physically see, but not other players unless you would have to go through the effort of sharing deliveries that.
I mean, if they're all in-game assets, there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't be synced properly.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about custom, like if you use the in-game editor, like so you're basically like you'd be decaling your own ship with like a pre-select set of like patterns and stuff that you could set the coordinate for where it should be overlaid on top of the base color of the ship, then that should be done. But I don't think not a lot of live service games come to mind which allow you like liveries for personal vehicles.
No, I was thinking more like the way Forza does it.
Yeah,
you have, like, predefined selections.
Forza is a good
and effects.
caveat.
Like if I could have a matte black
but you're joining like a lobby for that, right? Where Star Citizen is a little bit more gray because you have it's kind of just a bunch of servers meshed together. I wonder how like whenever a player, whenever their servers decide that you've transitioned into a mesh with a whole bunch of new liveries, are you gonna have to sit there kind of periodically waiting for all those liveries to load in? Or I guess they'd hide it somehow, like it'd be loading in the back end. I suppose is the best solution
if it was
to
like
that.
A set of shaders, they would be downloaded at some point since it'd be a predefined library. Mm-hmm. So you would have encountered ideally at least one or two of the assets that are on the other ship, and then you would only have to render out a few of them, or not.
Yeah,
I mean, all you have to do is throw the hex codes. I'm not an expert in technical means, but like if the hex codes are all in the shader library, then in theory they're all there. It's just a matter of what surface they're applied to, and that shouldn't be too hard to download.
The only problem is they're not in your local library until you've seen them, until you've downloaded them.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and that would only be applicable to custom decals anyway. If it was just simple like color changes to certain parts of the ship, then I doubt that would be something that you need to be preloaded every time.
Now, could they cheese? Well, I guess Star Citizen has a very HUD focus, so it's kind of hard to. You couldn't exactly cheese or like hide your ship from others by just having a different like paint scheme that kind of matches the environment. So I guess that's an irrelevant balance consideration. So
I mean, I guess you could try. There are skins or paints that kind of mimic the colors of areas as it is, but you still have radar and signatures and things like that. So I don't know how much good it'll do you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're within radar detection range, you're spotted no matter what. So
yeah,
I guess it would make a difference if you're dogfighting and your ship is bright white and you have this, a icy moon behind you as a backdrop or the sun. That would maybe help.
But that would only, in real life, that would only apply if the sun was reflecting off that planet. Because if the sun is somewhere else in the solar system in its orbit, like depending on your position, right? That planet, that white planet, could look completely black if there's no light.
Oh, God, Dave, don't even get me started because otherwise I'm going to start talking about the stupid
Right?
sniper scope glint.
I refuse to. I refuse to talk about snipers. I think, just in whole, I think Star Citizen is really cool in that you get a really interesting combined arms style gameplay. The org I mentioned a lot. We do a lot of combined arms stuff where we to pull us off topic into something else, where we are taking a big ship, loading it up with ground vehicles or smaller ships, and then we've got a fighter wing and we've got gunship wings, and people doing a little bit of everything. And we do these big battles. There's one we do. It's like a King of the Hill style thing where we get a bunch of infantry guys on the ground with vehicles, and they move in and they take a hostile occupied bunker, and they have to hold it for a certain amount of time. Then they have to take a box from it to a different location. At the same time that they're doing that, there's another team trying to do the same thing. And so you've got dogfighters in the air. It's really cool to watch. I was on the ground for one of these, and I'm looking up in the sky, and I'm watching all these hornets fight each other in the air. And then in the distance, I see a Hercules appear on the horizon, and I watch some of the hornets peel off and go try and attack the Hercules. And next thing I know, I got hit by a tank because I wasn't paying attention. But
Yeah.
It's still really cool. It's still really cool how big this game is.
I mean, that's life, You're watching something unfold, just astounded by the intricacies and the dynamics of, like the combat unfolding before you, and then you get hit by a 70mm tank round.
Yeah. It's I equated it to, I think I heard a story about somebody about the Civil War, how people would sit in their houses and watch the two armies march up and meet each other, or the Revolutionary War, and watch the two armies march up into a field and meet each other and watch the battle for entertainment.
Yeah, and then they would get hit by a stray cannonball.
Yep, that's exactly right.
They get hit by a 70mm tank round.
Just in the middle of the Revolutionary War, a 70mm tank round came out of nowhere. I saw, what was it, wasn't Sitcom, was it IAE last year? Whenever they initially announced it, I saw the releases. I haven't followed too much. I found myself getting way too hyped for certain things and getting burnt out waiting for the smallest of details. So I'm kind of like, how like you can't binge a show all at once, even though you want to, and then you just lose interest. So hold away from following things as much, so that way I could get a really cool, good clump of things at SitCon and be really excited.
Yeah, and I don't blame you for that. But unfortunately, with the with the premise of this show, it has kind of demanded more of my attention to,
Sure.
especially things that pertain to me, such as this Maelstrom system, because apparently, and I'm going to very briefly reiterate this since we've talked about it before, it apparently they are bringing in real world, or at least partial real world calculations for things like, how ammunition types interact with materials, material properties.
So like
all the way down
to
things like beam deflection and.
Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be
apparently
cool.
I don't know how deep these really truly go, these calculations, because it is, as someone in the mechanical engineering field, it's a lot of math to be doing for a live
that was
game.
kind of going to be my point. How much calculations can CIG cram into the back end before you need a full sim setup to run this game on 30 FPS? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and Mike, I think you, if you don't mind reiterating your original comments, because I'm curious what Dave thinks of it from his perspective.
Yeah, so my concern with Maelstrom for the third time today is if we are going to see significant impacts on performance with the rendering of all of the bits and pieces that break off of ships and objects.
I bet you we would. Now, my question is, can CIG mitigate it, and maybe in the heat of combat, and this is going to be hard to do in a type of game where everything's happening all at once, but like in a combat type scenario where weapons are firing, do they maybe declutter to keep performance up, and then once the fight's over and nobody's firing weapons, these pieces start to pop in? Is that maybe a good middle ground?
Yeah, you actually scared me with that thought. I was thinking like, oh man, hope they don't introduce like fog of war where you just don't see things because it's too dusty or smoky, and then they render in as
I
the
mean,
quote unquote smoke clears.
don't say that because CIG is going to listen, and that's going to be the next patch update. But
There'll be
God.
I mean,
a simulator game mode. It's just for people like that.
I think that fog of war you're talking about, to go tangentially, would be cool if you're landing on planets like Daymar or Utrepi, or those dusty, icy planets where your exhaust or your landing system or your VTOLs kick up dust.
Mhm.
I think that would be cool. I don't think it needs to happen in space combat. I don't, because like the way that Gladius went over the water in the Maelstrom demonstration to show the water physics, I think that's cool. And if you could apply that to dust particles in certain situations, I think that would be cool. But again, I don't think you need that in combat. But my hope is that there's some kind of middle ground between, we need to render in all these bits and pieces flying off these ships, but the more we're rendering in, the more my Frankenstein computer is going down to 2 frames a second instead of 6 frames a second during combat. At least at 6 I can shoot. So
Yeah, I mean, the lengths I've had to go to pilot, especially during Xenothreat, with like
I
sub
heard it was
15
bad.
FPS, it was really bad. I mean, I think that was the entire reason that the Idris was able to kill us, Mike, was because I was lagging so bad that I don't know. It's really weird when because the game, it doesn't feel input laggy, even if the game itself is lagging. But it's like there's definitely additional desync that happens because I think when Alex made that comment about the Idris pointing at us, I was like, what? The gun's not even pointed directly at us because it was like 30 degrees off to the left, and then we just got blown up. And as we get blown up, I see the gun is now facing us. So it's like,
Yeah, I
like,
think
oh,
because of the
okay.
way the technology works with client side and server side, we're not noticing the lag. It's not like in World of Warcraft or New World where you see your character doing the same motion 3 or 4 times before it actually does it. Instead, we're getting smooth-ish performance on our side, but the server isn't keeping up. And then all of a sudden there's that desync, and that now all of a sudden the gun's pointed at your face when it wasn't. You know.
Yeah, and you take a Mac round the size of like a small moon to your head.
That's not a moon. That's the Drake Leviathan.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, but Xenothreat was a hot mess.
Was it? I have
Yeah.
never done Xenothreat. Every single time it's been in game since I've been playing, I have stayed off because I hear it's just a CF. The
Not even
only
the
one,
first one.
nope, not even the first one. I've never done a Xenothreat. I've done Jump Town, but I've never done a Xeno, and I've done Ninetales Lockdown. That was my very first event ever. Was a Ninetales Lockdown.
I never did that's the event I've missed. I've missed all the Ninetales one
The
events.
Ninetales one wasn't super noteworthy, so you didn't miss too
It
much.
really wasn't, but it was the way I made my first millions, and when I fell in love with the Connie Taurus. Because
Yeah.
it was medical supplies, I think. And I'm literally 2 days old in Star Citizen. My buddy told me to buy a Cutlass. I didn't listen to him, and I bought a Connie Taurus.
Good job.
And so I'm flying around. We're doing cargo, right? And we're just. I'm like, hey, I need your help doing medical supplies. I've got all these medical supplies. I need your help. And he's like, okay. And so we did it, and we made a crap ton of money. And from then on, it was just that is what we do now.
It was my experience with I think it was ISC when I first started playing happened like a month or two after, and there was what I eventually learned was some kind of bug where they were paying like exorbitant amounts of money for audio equipment, audio visual equipment, and I would just run that stuff. I guess wherever the ships were going would be where the demand is, and so I was running that stuff, and that's how I made my first couple million.
Yep. It was a really cool moment for me. It was a light bulb moment. It was like this is what the game could be. I
So you
wish
meant
the commodity price alerts would be a little bit slower, where like you had more time to get them done.
Yeah, they really need to work on that system. I hope the new cargo missions that they've got are gonna fix some of that nonsense with
How
the
much have you heard
trading.
about them?
I know that they're they vary in size. I think the minimum is like 6 to 10 SEU of cargo, and depending on the length and complexity of the contract, like how much cargo you have to transport, will determine your payout.
I've heard that they're not commensurate. So even though you do this really big, long, complicated one with lots of cargo, the payout is more, but it's not more enough to justify not just running a bunch of the short ones really, really quickly together.
Yeah, I think they said that the payouts were temporary and that in their final version they should reflect more of the effort, like the time that you put in to do them.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that that's the case. But especially ever since they did those price changes, they also knocked down the payout submissions like as if we wouldn't notice, and they've been super stingy ever since, which I'm not been very happy about either.
I mean, I guess I'm okay with it because it gives me something to grind for. Like I'm all for valuing my time, but I'm also sometimes I'm a grinder where I need a reason to log on and play. And if I want to go buy, God forbid, the A90 jump, which I will never buy ever, I hate that ship. But if I ever want to go buy it, and I want to buy it in game, then now I have a reason to because it's so expensive. It's not like I can do it in just one night. You know, I
Right.
got to log on and do a couple things. I got to be smart about what I do. I got to think about my game loop. And this is again coming from a PvE nerd over here who wants to do things and hopefully not get bothered.
Yeah, but also, it would have been one thing if they had just doubled all the ship prices, but the fact of the matter is they quintupled them in a lot of
Yes.
cases.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when I noticed. I think it was it the MSR? I think I went to go look at because I had a couple mil, and I was like, oh, I'll grab an MSR just to putz around in. It was not. I could not afford it.
It wasn't something
Yeah.
you could just grab anymore.
Yep. Which is okay. I mean, now that actually brings. I have a question for you guys. How do you guys feel about a full database wipe?
At this
Dude, that's what I've
point,
been waiting for.
yeah, I'm for it right now. Yeah, that'd be good.
Too. I think that is the general consensus is that we have been on the same. Well, I guess Michael, answer. What do you think? Full database wipe.
The reason why I kind of refrain is because I'm not too versed in the current meta. I don't know how badly it needs it. I mean, from my perspective, I might as well be like a complete. I guess, is it mainly to resolve the issue of there being a large gap between you and old players? Is that what the.
So
No,
basically, it'd be
it's
like all
because
the things
Pyro.
you have purchased. Yeah. So it's all the things you have purchased in game using AUEC, such as ship components,
Yeah, I mean, I'm
weapons,
I'm familiar with what would
ships.
be lost, but it's just like what's the why are we for a database
Yeah,
wipe?
so the reason they're doing it is because when Pyro drops, they want it to be a clean slate for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
No, but
I
why
think
are
he
you
wants to know
for
why
it?
we
I
want it
can
to
tell.
be
Oh,
wiped.
Yeah, I can tell you why I want it to happen. But Sean, why don't you go first?
Oh,
Why do you
oh,
want
oh.
it to happen?
Why I want it to happen is just because I want it to happen simply because they said they're going to do it. If they walked it back and said no, we're not going to do it, I'd be like, okay, whatever. But because I wouldn't mind keeping my money and the stuff that I have already. But the fact that they said that they're going to do it, at this point, I'm just like, please just get it over with. Because currently, I have no reason to want to play the game because I know it's going to get wiped anyway when 4.0 launches.
Okay.
Understandable.
And Mike, what about you? Why do you want it?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. There's really just not a lot of reason to play right now. Gaining money is definitely not a priority, and gaining ships is definitely not a priority. So it kind of would give me another reason to get back to actually playing. But also, like, my ship inventory is just a mess. Like, I have duplicates of things, and I'm missing ships that I don't want to bother rebuying because I'm going to lose them anyway. It would just be nice. And plus, mentally, that's just how I work. Like, I like to have a messy desk, and then I completely clean it off and start over from scratch. And so right now I'm at the messy desk kind of point with Star Citizen, so I'd like it to just be cleaned off.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
think
it sounds like it's not so
Oh,
much you want the wipe, you just want it to happen sooner so that you can quickly get back into it.
Yeah,
Is what it sounds like.
yeah, and I'm along the same page as it's not that I don't want to wipe because I'm a big fan of like Mike said, cleaning the desk off, starting fresh. If there was some sort of tool like a character reset button that we could do, where it deletes your ASOP terminal that isn't pledged. It deletes, basically start as a brand new character with just your pledges. That would be nice because I'm a big believer in, I don't know how I want to say this, but specializing. So like for a while there in 322, I was focusing on being a bomber pilot. So eclipses and all the eclipse parts and retaliators. And so I have a lot of different ships that I'll never use ever again because I don't like that style of gameplay anymore. I don't need my prospector anymore. I'm never going to go mining again, to my knowledge. And if I do want to go mining, it'd be nice to not have the prospector and have to go earn it. So again, to play. But I am not against playing. I am not against a wipe in any way.
And I completely respect that. I personally don't agree, but I respect it. Because the way I see it is it's more of, well, we've talked about this in the past, Mike and I, but I also don't equate owning ships with progression. The only real form of progression in the game currently is the reputation system. So owning ships is useful, especially if you want to do various things. But I also think that for me at least, general accumulation of things is more akin to me building up a toolbox of things that I have at my disposal. So they're more helpful to me, and I don't really ever look at tools and think, oh man, I'm going to throw this out, because that's just not how I work, or that's just not how I roll with things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'd be more apt to not wipe if there was a way to remove things. Like if I could just sell a ship or just delete it. At this point, I might not care for most of them. And the other problem is with the soft wipes, all of your components and weapons get moved to your home planet. And my home planet inventory is at like 170%. So it makes it impossible to do stuff. And to go through the trouble of configuring ships all over again and all that stuff is just such a pain with, all these soft wipes happening every time there's a patch. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me that would make me not care about a wipe at all is let me clear out my ship inventory list of ships that I've purchased in game. I don't care if it's 1/10 of the initial buy price that I get back or zero, right? Let me sell my extra, I think I have 3 Ares Infernos right now, and I don't know why. I don't know why I bought 3 of them, but I did. So let me clear those out since I'm not using the Ares Inferno.
Yeah, it's so hard to get rid of things. Like, the way I used to do it in the past after a soft wipe is I would throw a bunch of inventory on like a C1 and just send it off into space. But now the ships don't hold anything, so it's like impossible to get rid of things in bulk.
Yeah, and then also that stuff comes back on a soft wipe. Because anything that just disappears into the void, a ship that's listed as unknown, if you like, back in the day when we would 30K or crash a desktop and your ship would be lost and, you'd respawn somewhere else and you'd have to claim that ship, even if it never got destroyed, that stuff comes back. If you used to come back when your character repaired. So.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I lost
a bunch of like, what was it, Pledge Store gear, like the orange hazard armor. Like I'd wear that.
The pledge stuff comes back anyway.
It comes back every reset, but what would happen is I would wear it, I would fall out of my ship, right? And then I would exit the menu, come back in, but I had it stored on my ship. Let's just say I had it on my raft in like one of the storage chests. And in my ship I had to reclaim, right? So that initial one gets lost, all of its inventory is lost. I would then go character repair, and the things that were lost to the void would come back. Whereas normally they wouldn't.
So it was one of the old like pseudo duplication glitches that used to happen.
Yes. Yeah. So it was a valid way of doing things to get subscriber flare or whatever back if you lost it to something like that. Now, if you died or if if it got destroyed and that box was physically destroyed, or you sold it or somebody looted it, somebody had it in their inventory, it would not come back. But because like I gave it to my buddy once, I gave him the armor, and I was like, oh, I'll just character repair and get a copy of it back. That did not work. Because that item was still in his inventory. Yeah, and so what happened when I character repaired is that item was still gone because the server knew it still existed out there, right? Like that item entity was tracked.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about like the 1,000 set of dust up armor that I have from however long ago I bought it. Because for some reason that magically reappeared. I don't even remember buying it. So what I would typically do is just throw it all on a big cargo ship and blow it up or send it off into space.
Yeah, I mean that is a valid concern, Mike. Is there's really no way to delete anything, even in the current game. Like the closest you get to it is blowing up a ship with stuff in the inventory.
And again, on soft reset, like when they do a big enough patch, you have to reset your starting planet. Stuff will come back. Stuff you thought you blew up. Because I think the only way to untie an item from your character's identity, your UPC code for your character, is to sell it.
I've also had some. It is noteworthy. I know for a fact I've had some success with tossing stuff into the planet core of Crusader. Like on the Siege of Orison, I remember there was this one very particular helmet that I found that I thought about keeping, and it was something that I had worn around for a while because I didn't have any other helmet at the time, and then I decided it was really ugly, so I chucked it off into the planet core, and I never saw that thing again. It never reappeared in my inventory, ever. So
you talking about the Argus helmet?
No, although that is another one that I hate. So
didn't you have one that you got rid of and it would come back all the time, and it wasn't a pledge item or anything? It was just some random helmet you found.
Yeah, it was an Argus helmet. Yes, it's part of the reason I hate them so much. Is because for like a couple patches, I had one that would just keep reappearing in my inventory every time they did a soft wipe.
Ooh, speaking of inventory and armor, I don't know if you guys have talked about this in any episodes, but here's something to talk about: is what do you guys think about the fact that they want pilots to not be able to wear armor while flying?
I think that's horseshit. You should at least be able to wear light armor. I understand not being able to wear a backpack, but no. That's horseshit.
What about like a flight suit armor type that's like less than light armor, that's literally just undersuit? No. Undersuit beefed up. Have like some minor...
Listen,
what about...
If I can sit in a full tack vest and everything in a chair and be relatively okay, other than slightly uncomfortable, I should be able to sit in light armor.
So what about if you had a debuff for sitting in...
For wearing armor.
Yeah, for wearing armor.
Yeah, like maybe you get up from the chair slower or something. I don't know.
Well, okay, so like here's a real world example. The Blue Angels don't fly with G-suits because it affects their performance in the air. So, you know, that modern
but I mean, if
if
you're on a larger ship, that shouldn't really matter anyway.
Agreed. It shouldn't. But, so I guess my point is, and this could just be me looking for more immersion, I'm sick and tired of walking around a large ship in a full set of armor. If I'm just a pilot or a gunner, I'm going down with the ship. Why do I need a set of armor?
So, to build off of that, Dave, I think that just plays into another problem that I don't remember if we've talked about it, but the fact that you can't wear clothes under your armor currently is kind of annoying still. Like, you know...
I agree with that. The other suggestion I had for that once, I said it to a friend, was undersuit, but let me put a leather jacket on over top of my undersuit. I'd be happy with that.
Why can't you put on clothes over your armor also? Like, it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to fit a leather jacket over some of the, you know, the arm pauldrons that they've got in the game. Like, even the one that Mike is wearing right now, the suit that he's wearing, I don't think he would be able to fit a jacket over that. But, you know, for the stuff that you could feasibly, like, why not let people do that? It would, I mean, even if a first iteration was just for testing purposes and there was a lot of clipping and stuff going on, I still think it would be fine as long as, you know, that's like their first implementation of it.
Yeah, my thought was, hey, I understand why I need to wear an undersuit, right? We're in space, vacuum, pressure, whatever. I understand undersuit, so make me wear an undersuit, but let me throw jacket level, because you have the tier system for clothing, let me throw jackets and gloves and shoes on over top of this thing. Right? So that way I can walk around with my Squadron 42 jacket in an undersuit And then give me like the trash bag looking helmets they have that are supposed to be for Hurston's atmosphere. Why aren't those pressurized? Why can't I wear that? Or why can't I wear normal clothes? Let me wear a t-shirt and jeans and a jacket with one of those helmets if I'm doing cargo runs, so that way if I walk off onto a planet that doesn't have an atmosphere, I at least have some time before I suffocate. It doesn't need to be the highest quality. It's not like I'm standing outside for an hour. Give me enough time to get from my ship to the airlock to go sell my cargo without having to put on a full set of armor.
So, Dave, the only problem with that is that for a helmet to function like that, well, helmet is a bit of a strong word.
Yeah.
The plastic bag is not quite a helmet. They would have to have a similar atmospheric density to Earth. So, like, for instance, Mars, you technically could get away with having a very slightly pressurized bag of air on your head as a as a suit, or a suit helmet.
But if the air density wasn't the same, that they wouldn't stay.
Yeah, well, the thing with Mars is that the density is similar enough that as long as you have a little bit of positive pressure, you overpower the pressure of Mars's atmosphere, and thus allowing you to maintain, an Earth atmosphere, in an enclosed space. It might be possible on some of the larger moons, but most of the moons, in Stanton at least, it wouldn't work.
So wait, but like, here's my question. So like, the garbage bag type helmet, is it not just a collar that goes around my character's neck and then encases their head like fishbowl style?
Yeah, but the problem is it's hard to explain. So in space, for example, the bag doesn't have enough, well, presumably, unless it's made out of some futuristic material and not actually just plastic, it doesn't have the enough tensile strength to hold one atmosphere, presumably.
Okay, so it would need to be wibbly wobbly, timey wimey,
if you think
gamified.
about it logistically, think about inflating a balloon, and then what would happen if you try and inflate a plastic bag? What happens if you try and inflate a plastic bag?
Sure.
It
okay,
explodes.
so, but like, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but like, real life example, would I die if I had a helmet hypothetically that could do what we're talking about? Right, my head, my airways are completely enclosed in this safe vacuum, just neck up. Would the rest of my body be okay, so to speak?
No.
Minus like weather and stuff.
So,
or would like my fingers explode?
If we're talking about Mars, you would like slowly just come apart. I think you can survive. Like we haven't tested this, but I think some estimates put like you could survive up to like a minute or two on the surface of Mars if you had an oxygen supply and no suit, but there just isn't enough pressure to like keep you together.
Sure.
So,
okay.
But in space, it's even worse.
Star-Lord in
because you
space,
have, like,
in
that
space, scene where
it's
Star-Lord...
even worse because there's no resistance from pulling your body apart, so to speak.
What is pulling my body apart? I'm in space.
Like there's
The
nothing
pressure
keeping you
inside
together.
your body, because you would have one atmosphere of
so
pressure
everything
essentially.
would want to come out. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, I'm being hugged by the atmosphere right now. That's what's keeping me alive. Okay.
And that's the same basic principle that to my understanding is how the undersuits and Star Citizen function is. There's only two types of spacesuits that in our reality exist currently. One is the traditional, like, you're inside of a kind of submarine spacesuit, which is the old style NASA spacesuit, which is like, it's almost like something you climb into. It's not really so much a suit as it is an exosuit. But then the second type of pressurized suit is one that physically constricts your body and keeps it held together, so to speak.
Gotcha.
But the second type suit is a lot more rare, and I don't think they've done 0G testing with it, but they haven't done I don't think they've ever, to my knowledge, done a spacewalk with a constrictive suit like that.
So regardless, for Star Citizen purposes, my character needs to be wearing an undersuit 100% of the time if I'm anywhere but somewhere with
ideally for your head too, because your head is also in and of itself a contained environment that needs to be held together, know, for lack of a better phrase.
Interesting. So let me put a bomber jacket over top of my undersuit. You got me sold,
Yeah.
CIG. That's it.
But you definitely need a real helmet. Like I said, the only way that those bag helmets could work is if you're on a planet that has at least a similar atmospheric density to Earth.
Okay.
You know, so like, I don't know what the threshold is off the top of my head, but like 0.95 at least, I would think, of, you know, one atmosphere.
Sure.
Just somewhere around
Oh,
there.
I follow that logic.
You ready to wrap this one up?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know if Michael had any thoughts that he wanted to add, or you, Mike.
Nope, don't have anything to add.
So, I want to thank everyone who tuned in for the live stream, and I want to thank our special guest today, Michael, for joining us, and our special call-in guest, Dave, for coming in as well and offering some of his commentary.
Anytime you guys want me back, just let me know. I'm happy to be here.
Hell yeah, man.
Alrighty, we'll see y'all next time.
Later.
See ya.